Wyoming, 1883. There are evenings that know they are endings. The light comes in gold and amber, the color of something that won't come back, and everything it touches looks more itself than usual. The fence posts, the dry grass, the mountains going purple in the west. The kind of silence where you both know exactly what's ending and neither of you says it. Tomorrow, Clare Sutton would be on the eastbound train. 11 weeks, and she had known the ending was coming, every single one of them. She had known it sitting on this same porch every evening, watching the Wyoming sky do what Wyoming skies do, with Will Hadley in the chair beside her. Not saying much because he was not a man who said much. And both of them watching the same light on the same mountains. She looked at him, the jaw, the gray at his temples, the stillness of a man who has made peace with the land he lives on. "You know," she said, "you deserve someone younger than me." She meant it kindly. She meant it as a gift. She was 20 years old, and he was 45, and St. Louis was waiting, and the train left at 8. He turned and looked at her and smiled slowly the way he smiled. The smile that started somewhere behind his eyes before it reached his face. "Funny," he said. "I was hoping for someone like you." The Wyoming evening held them both. The light went from gold to amber to the color of a thing ending. In the morning she boarded the train anyway, because that had always been the plan, and because some things once said cannot be unsaid, and she would be thinking about that smile for a very long time. She had not planned to notice him. She had not planned to notice much of anything in Milfield, Wyoming, a town not designed to be noticed. A general store, a church, a livery, a post office, and approximately 200 people who knew each other's business, with the comfortable thoroughness of people who have never needed to look anywhere else. Her aunt, Dorothy Sutton, lived on the edge of town with a vegetable garden and an opinion about everything. Clare had arrived the second week of July to help with the garden, to rest after a difficult winter in St. Louis, and to spend 11 weeks somewhere that was not the city before going back to the life waiting there. The bookkeeping position her father had arranged the apartment on Chestnut Street. The ordinary forward motion of a life with a plan. She met Will Hadley in her third week at the general store, where he was buying rope and she was buying flour, and they both reached for the counter at the same moment, and he said, "Excuse me?" and stepped back with the unhurried courtesy of a man who has never been in a hurry about anything. She noticed the gray at his temples, the steadiness, the way he looked at things directly, without performance. She did not notice that she had noticed any of this until later. He came to Dorothy's house the following Thursday to fix a fence section that had been giving trouble. Clare brought him water. They talked for 20 minutes about the fence and the dry summer and whether the creek would hold through August. He came back the Thursday after that and the Thursday after that. By the 5th Thursday, Clare had stopped pretending these were purely practical visits and had started making coffee instead of just water. And Will had started staying for an hour instead of 20 minutes. And Dorothy had started finding reasons to be somewhere else during that hour, with the transparent discretion of a woman who considers herself subtle. The evenings happened gradually and then entirely. After supper, the porch, the 2 chairs, the Wyoming sky doing what it did. Will saying things in the direct, unhurried way he said everything. Clare finding to her consistent surprise that she never wanted him to stop. Dorothy Sutton had stopped pretending not to notice things years ago. She saw Will Hadley the first Thursday he came to fix the fence, not as a handyman, but as a man who found reasons to stay. She saw Clare bringing water and then coffee. She saw the 20 minutes become an hour. She saw the hour become the whole evening. She said nothing. She had learned in 61 years of living that the best way to end something good was to point at it directly. She did, however, mention to Will when he arrived on the 4th Thursday that Clare was in the back garden, if he wanted to let her know the fence work was done. She did not need to mention this. He had fixed her fence 3 times now and knew where everything was. She mentioned it anyway. Will nodded with the expression of a man accepting information he had been hoping for. Dorothy watched from the kitchen window. She saw them standing by the garden fence. Will with his hat in his hands, Claire with dirt on her gloves from the beams she'd been staking. She watched Claire say something that made Will almost smile. She watched Will say something that made Claire actually laugh. She turned away from the window. That evening at supper, Claire was quieter than usual. The quiet of someone who has been thinking about something and hasn't decided what to do with it yet. Dorothy passed the bread and didn't ask. After supper, Claire said, "How long has Will Hadley been in Milfield?" 20 years, Dorothy said. Came from Virginia when he was 25. Built the ranch himself. He doesn't say much. No, Dorothy said. But what he says is true. That's rarer than people think. Claire looked at her coffee cup. Dorothy buttered her bread. Outside, the Wyoming evening was doing what Wyoming evenings do. And somewhere 6 miles north, Will Hadley was probably on his own porch looking at the same sky. And Dorothy Sutton was old enough to know what that meant, and wise enough to keep it to herself. September arrived the way it does in Wyoming. Suddenly, with the first cold morning that reminds you the mountains have been waiting, Claire had 3 days left. She had known the number for 2 weeks, counting down with the dread of someone who has realized too late to do anything about it, that the thing they came to escape from has become the thing they most want to stay for. She had not said any of this to Will. He came on the last Tuesday evening, the second to last evening, and they sat on the porch the way they always sat, the 2 chairs, the sky, the silence that had become its own kind of conversation. He had brought her aunt a jar of honey from the hives he kept on the north side of the property. They talked about the first frost, about whether Pete Calloway's cattle had come through the dry summer adequately, about the books she had been reading. She had been lending him books all summer, and he had been reading them, actually reading them, and returning them with the pages marked where he'd had a thought, which she had found unexpectedly moving every single time. Then the silence arrived. Not the comfortable kind, but the kind that knows what it is. She looked at the mountains going purple in the west. "Will," she said. He said, "You know you deserve someone younger than me." She said it looking at the mountains. She said it the way you say something true that you've been carrying carefully, because it matters, and quickly, because you are afraid of what comes after. He was quiet for a moment. Then he turned and looked at her and smiled. "Funny," he said. "I was hoping for someone like you." She looked at him. The Wyoming evening held them both in the amber light. She wanted to say something and couldn't find anything equal to the moment. So she didn't say anything, and neither did he. And they sat there until the light was gone. And when she went inside, she stood in the hallway for a long time, with her hand on the wall, breathing. She left on a Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock. Dorothy drove her to the station with the composed efficiency of a woman managing her feelings by managing the logistics. 2 trunks, the smaller bag, the crate of books, lighter now. She had left 6 of them with Will over the course of the summer. Will was at the station. She had not expected him. She should have. She knew him well enough by now to know that he was the kind of man who showed up when it mattered and didn't announce it in advance. But she had spent the morning telling herself he wouldn't come, which was a way of managing the alternative. He was standing by the platform with his hat in his hands. He helped with the trunks. He shook Dorothy's hand. He walked with Claire to the platform steps. They stood there with the train making its sounds behind her. "It was a good summer," she said, the most inadequate thing she had ever said. "Yes," he said, equally inadequate and somehow exactly right. She looked at him. The gray temples, the jaw, the steadiness that had been the backdrop of her entire summer, and felt something. She had no name for because she had never felt it before and hadn't had time to learn the word. "All right," she said. He nodded once. "I'll write back." She boarded the train. She did not look out the window as Milfield receded behind her, because she had decided not to, and she was a person who did what she decided. She sat with her hands in her lap and looked at the back of the seat in front of her. The train went east. Wyoming went past without her permission, and, somewhere behind her, on a platform in a town of 200 people, Will Hadley put his hat back on and walked to his horse and rode 6 miles north to his ranch. And the summer was over, and the silence that followed was a different kind of silence than any that had come before. I want to stop here for just a moment because I find myself thinking about that platform every time I read this part.
Two people who have spent 11 weeks learning to be honest with each other, and the most they can manage at the end is it was a good summer, which is not nothing. It is actually everything they have, from the United States to Australia, from Canada to the United Kingdom, from Ireland to New Zealand. Wherever you are tonight, thank you for riding along. What country are you listening from today? Drop it in the comments. Now let's get back, because the first letter is about to arrive in St. Louis. She wrote first. She had told herself she would wait, that it would be more dignified to let some time pass before putting pen to paper.
She lasted 9 days. The letter was practical. She described the apartment on Chestnut Street, the bookkeeping position, the way St. Louis felt after Wyoming, louder, closer, the horizon blocked at every turn. She asked about the fence on the north pasture. She asked about the hives. She signed it, Clare Sutton, as if he might have forgotten her name. His reply arrived in 3 weeks, 4 paragraphs, short, direct, entirely him. The fence was holding. The hives had produced well into October before the cold came. The ranch was quiet. He had finished the book she'd left, the one about the man who spent 20 years trying to get home and had a thought about the ending. He wasn't sure how to put into words, but he would try. He tried in the 2nd paragraph. I think he was always going to get there. The question was just whether he'd recognize home when he saw it. Some people walk past the thing they're looking for because they've decided it should look different than it does. She read that paragraph 4 times. She wrote back the next morning. The letters found their rhythm. Hers arriving in Wyoming every 3 weeks. His arriving in St. Louis, with the reliable patience of a man who wrote when he had something to say and took his time saying it. Not love letters exactly, something more specific. 2 people telling each other the truth in the way that only becomes possible when there is distance between you and nothing immediate at stake. She told him about the bookkeeping which she was good at and which did not interest her. He told her about the first snow which had come early and kept him in for 3 days with nothing but the fire and her 6 books which he was rereading in order. She read the line about the books 3 times. Outside her window, St. Louis was being St. Louis, moving too fast to notice anyone standing still. And she sat at her desk with his letter and felt the distance like a physical thing. By November, the letters had changed. Not all at once, the way things change when 2 people are telling each other the truth, and the truth keeps getting more specific. She told him about her father, a man who had arranged her life with the best intentions and the assumption that arrangement was the same as happiness. She told him about the bookkeeping position, secure, suitable, and producing in her the feeling of having borrowed someone else's life and finding it almost fit. She told him she had started reading at lunch instead of eating with her colleagues because the conversations were about things she could not make herself care about. He told her about 20 years of Wyoming winters and what they teach you about what matters. He told her about his father, a Virginia man who had come west because the East had stopped making sense to him and how he had understood that decision better as he got older. He told her the ranch was quiet in November, in a way that was different from how it had been quiet in previous November. Though he did not explain the difference, she understood the difference. She was sitting at her desk on a Tuesday evening when her colleague Margaret knocked to ask if she was coming to the social at the Hendersons. "Not tonight," Claire said. Margaret looked at the letter on the desk. She was a perceptive woman and said nothing about what she noticed. "Wyoming," she said. "Wyoming," Claire said. After Margaret left, she picked up the letter and read the last paragraph again. There is a thing that happens in November here when the snow comes and the ranch goes quiet and you have a lot of time to think. I find I'm thinking about the same things. I don't know what to do with that information yet, but I thought you should have it. She put the letter down. She picked up her pen. Something was building in these letters. She could feel it the way you feel weather coming. A pressure change before the storm arrives. She wrote back that same evening. For the first time, she did not reread what she had written before sealing it, because rereading was a way of taking back things that were true. And she was tired of taking back things that were true. The December letter took her 4 attempts. Not because she didn't know what she wanted to say, because she knew exactly and kept stopping herself. And then finally, on the 4th attempt, she stopped stopping. She told him that St. Louis was fine, that the apartment was fine, that the position was fine, that fine was the most honest word she had for most of her life here, and that she had recently understood that fine was not what she had been looking for when she boarded a train to Wyoming in July, and it was not what she had found. She told him that she thought about the porch, not dramatically. She was careful about that. She said it plainly. I think about the porch in the evenings. I think about the chairs and the silence and the mountains. I have a window in this apartment that looks at a brick wall, which is a perfectly adequate window, and I sit at it in the evening sometimes and think about what a different view would look like. You'll understand what I mean. She told him that she had been rereading the book she'd given him, the one about the man who spent 20 years trying to get home, and that she thought she understood, now what he had meant about recognizing home when you see it. She sealed the letter before she could reconsider. His reply arrived on the 28th of December. It was the longest letter he had sent, 2 full pages in the careful handwriting she had come to know, as well as a voice. He said, I received your letter and read it twice. The second time I was sitting on the porch. It was cold enough that I shouldn't have been outside, but I wanted to be where I've always thought most clearly. I want to say something to you, and I want to say it correctly. The next paragraph was 1 sentence. She read it. She set the letter down on the desk. She stood up and went to the window that looked at the brick wall and stood there for a long time. Then she went back to the desk and read the sentence again. Some answers need to settle before you can give them. She wanted to give this one right. The sentence was, I would like you to come back to Wyoming. Not, I miss you. Not, I love you. Not anything that could be misread or softened or explained away. Just that. And then I'm not asking you to give up anything you want. I'm telling you what I want because you have been telling me what you want in these letters, and it seemed right that I should do the same. If the answer is no or not yet or something more complicated than either of those, I will understand. But I thought you should have the information. She wrote back in January. It took her 2 weeks, and it was the shortest letter she had sent. 1 page, 2 paragraphs. The first said that she had received his letter and understood what he was saying and was not going to pretend she didn't. The second said, I have been thinking about what you said since the 28th of December. I have thought about it every day. I think about Wyoming every day, which I have been thinking was about the place, but I am less certain of that than I was in October. What I am certain of is this. I am not afraid of the answer. I was afraid of it in September. I am not afraid of it now. I think that means something. She sealed it and mailed it and went to work. The days in January were short and gray, and the brick wall collected frost in the mornings. And she did her bookkeeping with the careful competence of someone who is very good at a thing that is not the thing they are thinking about. For the first time since September, the apartment on Chestnut Street felt not like home, but like a waiting room. She was waiting. She knew now what she was waiting for. His reply came in February. She knew what she was hoping for when she opened it. She had stopped pretending otherwise. He wrote, Your letter arrived on the 14th. I read it on the porch again. It was considerably colder than December, and I stayed out longer than I should have. There is something I want to tell you that I have been trying to find the right words for since September, and I am going to try now. I have lived alone for 20 years. not unhappily.
I want to be clear about that. I built something here that is real and that I am proud of and that it has been enough. I am telling you this so you understand that what I am about to say is not loneliness speaking. I have been lonely before, and I know what that sounds like, and this is not it. What I'm going to tell you is this. The summer was different. You were different, not because you were young. I want to be very clear that your age has nothing to do with what I am saying, and if you ever again suggest that I deserve someone younger, I will disagree with you as directly as I know how. You were different because of who you are. The way you looked at things, the way you said what you meant, the way you left 6 books with a man you'd known for 11 weeks because you thought he should read them. I would like to see you again, not in letters, in person. I would like to sit on the porch and look at the mountains and hear what you think about things.
I am going to come to St. Louis in March. If that is acceptable to you, write back and tell me when. She read the letter twice at the kitchen table. Then she went to her desk. She wrote back that same day, 1 line. March is acceptable. I will be at the station. She sealed it before she could add anything, because 1 line was the right answer, and there was nothing to add that would make it more true. She put on her coat and went to work. She did not look at the brick wall. She was thinking about March. She was at the station 20 minutes early. She told herself this was practical. It was practical. It was also entirely beside the point. The platform was busy. St. Louis doing what it always did, moving too fast to notice anyone standing still. She stood near the east end where she could see the arrivals, held her coat closed against the March wind and waited. The train from the west came in at 1:30. She watched the passengers come down the steps. Businessmen, families, a woman with 3 children, and the look of someone who has been traveling too long. She watched the platform fill and fin. She looked at every face, and then she saw him. He came down the steps the same unhurried way he did everything, scanning the platform. And then he found her. He stopped. She stopped. St. Louis went on being St. Louis around them, loud and indifferent, and entirely unaware that something was happening at the east end of the platform that had been building since a July afternoon in Wyoming, when a man reached for a counter and said, "Excuse me?" and stepped back. He crossed the platform. She did not move. He came to her the way he had always come to things, without hurry, without drama, with the intention of a man who has thought carefully about what he is doing and has no doubts about it. He stopped in front of her. He was not wearing his hat. He had it in his hands, the way he always held it when he was saying something that mattered. He looked at her, and he smiled slowly, the way he always smiled. The smile that started behind his eyes before it reached his face. The same smile she had been carrying in her memory since a September evening on a porch in Wyoming. She looked at him. The station moved around them. 11 weeks and 5 months of letters and 1 sentence in December and 1 line in February. And all of it had led here to this platform, to this man with his hat in his hands. "Will," she said. "Claire," he said. And that was all that needed to be said. Will Hadley wrote 1 sentence in December. "I would like you to come back to Wyoming." Not a declaration, not a promise, not a performance. 1 honest sentence from a man who had decided that telling the truth was more important than protecting himself from the answer. And Claire, 20 years old, 5 months and 1,000 miles from a porch she couldn't stop thinking about, read it and wrote back without fear. I think about what it takes to write that sentence, not the safe version, the one with enough vagueness built in that you can retreat from it later. The actual sentence, the one that cost something to send. Will had been alone for 20 years. He knew how to be alone. He was not afraid of Wyoming winters or the weight of a ranch in November with no one to talk to. He wrote that sentence anyway, not because he needed to, but because it was true. And she had left 6 books and made coffee instead of water and said real things on a porch for 11 weeks, and the truth was the least he could give back. Claire could have been careful with her answer. She could have softened it, hedged it, written something that kept all the doors open. She wrote one line instead. March is acceptable. I will be at the station. I think about those 6 words more than I think about most things.